Duke, first team, highest seed in the triangle in terms of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. They're going to be matched up against Oral Roberts. Your preliminary thoughts?
Lewis, it's my favorite time of the year, and I get to be graced with your presence today. We're suiting up. You've got the tie on. It's March Madness is here. St. Patrick's Day is here on Friday. I am fired up, and we're going to start with Duke. I think to answer your question right off the top, Lewis, Duke is the answer because of the matchup problems that they can create. And we talked about this some before the start of the ACC tournament. To me, it's as simple as the twin towers that you have, Dereck Lively's presence defensively, Kyle Filipowski's offensive prowess on the offensive end. Two freshman players, two players who can cause matchup nightmares for opposing teams. And they're going to go as far as those two players carry them. And I like the guard play by Jeremy Roach as well, the junior guard as well. I have faith in him. I think Duke's going to get it done in the first round. Really, to me, the next question then lies, how far can the Blue Devils go in the tournament?
I do think Duke has the more favorable bracket setup. I think the East is going to be a little bit easier to get through than the South that NC State is in. Being in the same bracket as, or the same region as #1 Alabama, #1 seed overall Alabama is definitely tricky. But before we even start looking ahead to round 2, Sweet 16, Elite 8, we got to start with the first round. Duke will be facing Oral Roberts, which, one of those teams that you don't think about until the brackets are released every year. No offense to Oral Roberts. No offense to all the folks who, where is Oral Roberts? I don't even know. No offense to any of them, but they present a really interesting matchup because of what they can do offensively. You're going to have a little bit of Duke's defense battling against Oral Roberts' offense. If you don't like stats, I'm sorry, this may not be the episode for you. I'm over here like spending way too long on KenPom, like looking at like effective field goal percentage and stuff like that. But with Oral Roberts, what's so interesting is, so KenPom wise, they are number 56 team overall in KenPom. So it's not like they are some totally out of the blue, no one's going to talk about them type squad. They are number 23 in terms of offensive efficiency and number 107 in terms of defensive efficiency. So what that tells me is they're a little bit up and down. They're going to be a little bit inconsistent just as a team overall when facing some of this more elite competition because of that difference between offensive and defensive efficiency. But when you look at effective field goal percentage, which, by the way, just for those that don't know, is a formula that combines 2-point field goals and 3-point field goals, and gives a little bit more weight to 3-pointers since they're technically worth more points. They're 56.1% effective field goal percentage, which is number 7 in the country. So long story short, they can shoot it. And so how is Duke's defense going to respond? That's going to be big.
Lewis, I'm glad you did your homework on the Summit League.
Oh, thank you.
And I had to do some brushing up myself. And it's like, okay, who is Duke going to need to stop? Oral Roberts has a senior named Max Ambas, Conference Player of the Year twice, averaging more than 22 a game. And so he's really the player that Duke's going to need to stop. I'd imagine they'll put Mitchell on Ambas to try to slow him down on the offensive end. And Oral Roberts has 2 other double-digit scorers, Connor Vanover and Isaac McBride as well. And so, yeah, I mean, Lewis, you hit the nail on the head saying, like, we don't, some of these teams, there's 68 different teams, a lot of them not from a Power 5 conference. So it's just like, okay, got to do your homework on kind of getting to know your opponent a little bit more. This is not one of those 5-12 matchups where I expect the 12 seed to win. And I hope I'm not joking, or I hope I'm not jinxing the Blue Devils here, because if I am, hey, feel free to roast me in the comments for those watching on YouTube.
I do think that you're gonna end up seeing Duke's defense having to make their money here. Truly, you look at tempo as well, and Oral Roberts is one of the faster tempo teams in the country, so they're going to try and speed it up. But if there's one thing we saw about this Duke team is that they are good at making the pace their own and doing what they want to do offensively and defensively. So that is going to be really interesting for me to see. Another thing to kind of keep in mind with this Oral Roberts team, they don't turn over the ball at all. They are the top team in terms of lowest turnovers per possession. So only 12.9% of their possessions end in turnovers. which is, like I said, the lowest in the country. So Duke is going to have to play defense and do their best to get defensive rebounds versus allowing them to pick and pop and do whatever they want on offense. Oral Roberts, that is. You mentioned also the win streak, Mark.
Yeah, Lewis, both teams are super hot entering this tournament. Oral Roberts has won 17 in a row. Duke's won 9 in a row. Head coach John Shire in his first season trying to become the first head coach to win the national title since Steve Fisher all the way back in 1989. So the narratives are already starting to write themselves where it's like, well, Duke couldn't get it done in the Final Four last year and Coach K's 42nd final season at Duke. With this team, Duke is hot at the right time. And there's a reason they got back into the AP top 25 last week, Lewis. Going into the tournament, the Blue Devils are playing their best basketball. And you said this earlier too, the defense is what's really stuck out to me, where they make it really, really tough for opposing offense to put the ball in the basket.
Mm-hmm. And then if you look, like, let's say hypothetically, they do come out on top of the matchup against Oral Roberts, they're going to have to play the winner of Tennessee and Louisiana Lafayette, which is another interesting matchup, because if it's chalk and Tennessee comes through, that's one of the best defensive teams in the country. So then you're getting, kind of strength against strength there with two defensive teams going against each other. Ziegler, the Tennessee starting point guard, tore his ACL a couple of weeks ago. So that's, I believe, like in the last week of the regular season. So that's something to keep an eye out for, if how Tennessee responds to that, how they continue to move forward with that. I believe after that game, they ended up beating the team that they were playing. They lost to Auburn in the regular season finale, I believe. I need to double check that. But then they lost very early on in the SEC tournament. So right now, it feels like a lot of people are kind of leaning towards a Louisiana Lafayette upset there against Tennessee. So then you kind of start once again having to look at, what's Duke's defense going to do in that. I think that, there is a solid chance that we could see Duke moving on to the Sweet 16, just based on what their region of their section of the East region looks like.
And Lewis, let me piggyback off this really quickly. We both spent times in our career in Knoxville, Tennessee, so we're very familiar with Ron. Yeah. But then ahead of this week's matchup against Oral Roberts too, Duke's a 6.5 point favorite entering this game. Gambling not quite legal. Online sports gambling not quite legal yet in North Carolina. That bill's coming in the legislature, but a 6.5 point favorite. I was surprised that this number wasn't higher. And what I'm curious to see, Lewis, is does this line shift between now and tip off later this week?
Yeah, that 12-5 matchup is always intriguing. So I wonder if that's kind of factoring into what people's thought process is with that.